Joining me now is Deputy Director of the Institute of Public Affairs, Daniel Wild. Dan, let's start with the Prime Minister. He's continuing to wage war against the coalition for their nuclear energy policy, seizing on the fact that smaller Liberals, those feckless state leaders, are not backing Peter Dutton's nuclear strategy.
New South Wales Opposition Leader, we can't wait for nuclear. Victorian Opposition Leader, there are prohibitions in place, so I'm not racing along the nuclear path. Victorian Nats Leader, you wouldn't be surprised that our view is exactly the same as John Pizzuto. Queensland LNP Leader, I've been very consistent with it. Nuclear is not part of planning in Queensland. I hate to state the obvious, but they've just said that David Crisafulli, Peter Walsh, John Pizzuto, Mark Speakman, Shane Love and Guy Barnett are all irrelevant. Well, they are as far as their plan is concerned, because their plan is friendless amongst their own people, amongst the business community and amongst anyone in the energy sector.
Well, I tell you, the Prime Minister has a point here. When you've got Liberal leaders being directionless, being obstructionist, completely having no sense of what's needed in this country, it's not like they're actually entering their debate with ideas of their own that are constructive. It's just a no to something that is a proven technology that works elsewhere in the world beautifully. And again, I keep saying it, we are sitting on the world's biggest reserves of uranium in this country.
Yeah, you're right. And I think what Anthony Albanese said then doesn't give him the conclusion that he intends, because it shows that Peter Dutton is a leader and the state Liberals are not leaders. And if you look at what he's saying, that the energy companies don't want it and the business community doesn't want it and the political class doesn't want it, okay, but the Australian people want it. So again, it shows that there's a dichotomy between the political class and the interests of the elites who back renewables because of the financial incentives and the ideological component, but they won't support nuclear, or at least not yet. And I think also the overreach we've seen in response to the coalition's plan is revealing, because the government knows that their own policy is failing. Energy bills are going up. Blackout risk is going up. The only thing they have to talk about is Peter Dutton's plan, not their own failing plan.
No, and you look at some of Chris Bowen's commentary, some of the statements he's putting out on social media, you really struggle to see how he can be the energy minister, the climate change minister. He sounds like some first-year arts student who's grappling with this issue. I really worry about it, because we are facing the real prospect of running out of gas.
Yeah, and I think this will be similar to the Voice debate, which is the government is not going to be able to make an argument to the Australian people because they're going to be caught short. Australians don't want net zero. They don't want to pay for net zero. This renewables only, renewables everywhere policy is being rejected by regional Australians, and with very, very good reason, because of the impact on their life. And as you sort of alluding to, the energy minister simply cannot sustain a meaningful argument in public, instead resorting to basically name calling. So the more Australians see of this, the more they'll turn against the government's policies.
His antics are getting more desperate, I can tell you, on social media. He's tweeting out Guardian articles. You know you're scraping the bottom of the barrel when you've got to resort to Guardian articles. Now, let's look at Labor, who normally do have great party discipline, unlike the Liberals, who are a broad church, too broad if you ask me. But the PM is terrified of a millennial in a hijab, a young Muslim senator from WA, Fatima Payman, who is the first federal Labor politician to cross the floor in 18 years. She voted against the government on a Greens motion recognising the statehood of Palestine.
I was not elected as a token representative of diversity. I was elected to serve the people of Western Australia and uphold the values instilled in me by my late father. Today, I have made a decision that would make him proud and make everyone proud who are on the side of humanity.
I've got to say, this is profoundly weak by the PM, Dan. We know why. He needs those voters in those seats in Western Sydney. We know they're very energised by this issue. But this sets a precedent. And what's the going to stop the next Labor senator who feels strongly about an issue defying the party and crossing the floor?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things. I mean, Senator Payman is a lightweight. I mean, she's barely able to defend her position in any sort of coherent manner there. You're right to say that this reinforces the Prime Minister is weak. Basically, you've got the Palestinian wing of the Labor Party that is essentially running government policy because, as you say, there's a handful of seats in mostly Western Sydney with 20 or 30% Islamic population, and rather actually leading the community to something better, they've capitulated to these very extremist demands. It's not surprising that Anthony Albanese has failed to provide leadership on this issue because it's a pattern of repeated behaviour. And I think a lot of Australians are concerned of the division and the lack of social cohesion we're seeing in our community on this very issue.